All right, everyone, we are live. Thank you all for coming today. I'm here with my intersectional arch nemesis, Catherine Klein. No, I'm only joking. No, I thought Catherine would be the best guest to have on for this because I think our opinions are going to differ a lot on this subject. So I can kind of get the perspective of kind of where people were coming from this backlash that I received, which I deem to be completely unwarranted and unfair. But I wanted to get Catherine's perspective on it because I think she gives a more grounded and reasoned piece of argument maybe than other people might from the kind of intersectional crowd. And we actually do share some very common ground on this, which most intersectionals won't share, which is good of Catherine, is that Catherine does agree that Hamas is bad and should be eliminated. So hooray, we're off to actually a good start with that. So yeah, we both acknowledge that, Islamists like death cults that go around butchering people in their homes is bad. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of apologism from the kind of intersectional community with regards to that. But Catherine doesn't take that stance, but then she does have a differing stance on many, many, many other things than me about this. So, Catherine, did you just want to quickly introduce yourself for anyone who's not like familiar with you at all, and just say like who you are and what you do and stuff?
Sure. I have a YouTube channel and I talk about animal rights, human rights, environmentalism. I guess you could say the theme of my channel is intersectionality. We've had many debates about this, or you and I have debated this specific topic, intersectionality, before, which I do want to get into a little bit, but
what would a conversation be without delving into intersectionality, Catherine?
Exactly. But I do want to say up front that I was reluctant to have this conversation at first because I felt I was ill-equipped to represent the pro-Palestine side well. Although I try to stay informed, I'm by no means a history buff or expert on this issue. I just thought about it a little and I came to the conclusion that you don't actually have to know much to recognize that Israel's actions are fucked up. And I think saying it's complicated is a Zionist talking point to kind of trick the layman into not speaking up for Palestinians. So that's where I'm coming from. To my audience, I'll just say, manage your expectations. I'm not a historian. So this is just two people who don't know a ton talking about this topic. I mean, George, you assured me that you are not an expert either. So I'm willing to hop on here and have this conversation with you. So
yeah, and this is what I tell actually everyone who actually thinks they're an expert on this, because they're not. I say to everyone who says, oh no, I know the history, I've read all the history of this. It's like, no, to be honest, mate, 1% of everything there is to know about this, because this is a huge history that goes back, you're talking literally thousands of years, the whole stuff with Arabs and Jews in the Middle East. There was stuff going on even before the creation of Israel in the 40s. So this is like an insanely historical stuff that not even an expert knows 1% of the whole thing. So me and you are just total noobs on this. So I'm not expecting anyone in the audience to be totally impressed by anything that either of us say. I just thought I would have you on because you could offer some insights to some perspective into this that, frankly, I'm not understanding. So basically, let's give the context of what happened. So I'm going to share my screen. I'll share the offending post, and then I want Catherine's perspective on why there was like any kind of backlash on this. So let me just share this window here. Can everyone see that? Can you see that, Catherine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. So this was my Instagram post. This was the offending post. So it just said, today marks 1 year since the barbaric attacks of October 7th. During my time in the animal rights movement, I've noticed Israeli vegans to be amongst the most kind, caring, dedicated, selfless, and thoughtful people in the entire movement. I'm absolutely appalled at the sickening amount of hatred and xenophobia they've experienced from within their own movement since that awful day. Then the next slide just said, so all the Israeli and Jewish animal rights activists trying to make this world a better place, we love you and thank you for all you do. Now, to my sheer disgust, I guess, this actually received massive amounts of backlash from pro-Palestine vegans, intersectional vegans and stuff. And in my mind, my only rational explanation for this is that it's purely motivated by hatred and xenophobia, anti-Semitism, even if people don't actually realize that it is. And perhaps we can go into that, because some people can espouse like unconscious forms of discrimination, right? But I want your perspective now, like Catherine, like what went wrong there, and like why on earth would there be backlash to that post?
Yeah. Well, for one, I think the implication is that Israeli vegans are, especially kind, caring, dedicated, and selfless, which is, in my opinion, a problematic assertion. As Soithias pointed out in the comments, I know that was a lively comment section there. But basically, you're saying that they possess some inherent goodness that other vegans do not. And I think that stereotypes, whether positive or negative, like reinforce racism and xenophobia. Because why would Israeli vegans be any more kind, caring, or dedicated than Indian vegans or Lebanese vegans or American vegans?
Yeah, let me just talk about why I said that. I mean, ultimately, we can only go off our own experiences for one. And I'm not lying when I say I've never had any kind of negative experience with an Israeli vegan. They always have just been totally kind and caring and dedicated towards me, towards the movement, totally kind towards me and towards all the other vegans around them. I've never seen them engage in toxic behavior at all. I have seen vegans from other countries engage in toxic behavior, including my own country. So this isn't some kind of xenophobic position I'm saying about other countries. I've been treated better by Israeli vegans than I have by my fellow Brits. But I think there's still a bias here, because when we talk positively about any other group within the movement, female vegans, we love you. Yes, male vegans rock. Good, thank you, men, for all you do in this movement. Black vegans rock. There's literally a website called Black Vegans Rock. These things don't get any kind of backlash. But then I say the Israeli vegans in the movement have been amongst the most kind and caring people I've met. I don't think there would be a problem with this post if I made that post about, let's say there was loads of anti-black racism going on in the movement, and I just said, Black vegans are awesome. I've known them to be among the most kind and caring people in the movement, blah, blah, blah. I don't think there'd be any backlash to it.
Well, that's not even my primary contention with your post. I was just starting like in chronological order. Like that was one of the first things you said. I think that in the context of, what's happening, this was posted on October 7th. I think that it would be kind of similar to if you were to say like, white vegans are some of the most kind, compassionate people. And it's just like, it's kind of a bizarre framing.
Well, actually, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that either. Like
because
there's a lot of anti-white hatred in the movement as well. And white vegans are generally awesome. They've been absolutely lovely in most cases.
Okay, that's not my primary contention.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest problem with this post is that in saying that Israeli and Jewish vegans have received a sickening amount of hatred and xenophobia from other vegans since October 7th, you are conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Because this insistence that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, it conflates Zionism with Judaism, which unfortunately does lead to a rise in anti-Semitism, because people assume that all Jews are Zionists and therefore direct their anger about the situation unfolding in Gaza, like at all Jews, rather than specifically Zionist Jews. And assuming all Jews are Zionists, assuming all zoos, dear God, I can't speak.
Zoos are bad. We both condemn zoos.
Assuming all Jewish people are Zionists is anti-Semitic. So I'm not going to deny that Jewish vegans haven't experienced any legitimate anti-Semitism from other vegans since October 7th. But the framing of your post, like claiming that they've received a sickening amount of hatred and xenophobia, indicates that you do believe anti-Zionism in the form of pro-Palestine posts, calling it a genocide, whatever, is anti-Semitic. Am I wrong about that?
So in my post, I wasn't actually referring to that, although I do think a lot of the anti-Israel, even government sentiment in our movement is maybe even unknowingly motivated by anti-Semitism, and we can get into that. The primary focus, I basically think you might have misinterpreted something, because I genuinely have seen a high level of xenophobia and anti-Semitism towards Israelis, towards Jews, as in not talking about Zionism, as in just plain unabashed hatred towards those people just for being from the country that they're from. I've seen,
right, which I agree. I condemn that. So that's kind of the point I was making. Like, there has been a rise in anti-Semitism since October 7th, but the reason is because Zionists conflate Zionism and Judaism and conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and that does lead to people like painting with a broad brush and assuming all Jews are supporting the Israeli government. So,
well, for a start, I think probably a good 90-something% of Jews do, even if they were to disagree with certain actions of their own government, they would agree that Israel has the right to exist as a country, because that's just a pretty standard part of being part of a ethnic group or a religion or whatever. I mean, Pakistan and Bangladesh were set up in the same way by a British partition in the 1940s that went against the wishes of the people living in the land at the time, India in this case. But you wouldn't expect Pakistanis and Bangladeshis in the movement to just be like, fuck my country kind of thing. Like, it would be like, we wouldn't expect that of them. We only expect that of us Israelis. If you and I grew up in Israel, Catherine, you and I would just be like, we would want Israel to have the right to exist. You and I would. It's quite rare that you would. There are Israelis in Israel who might take issue with it, who might, in the same way an Australian calls it, stolen land or something in Australia. You might get the odd Israeli like that, but part and parcel of being Jewish and Israeli, for the most part, is you are gonna just agree that your own country has a right to exist. That's just a pretty standard part of being part of.
I don't think that the United States has a right to exist. Like, I reject colonialism and manifest destiny and all that bullshit. Like, I don't.
But you do. Of course you do. You might think it was set up in an unethical way, as all countries were. But you of course, if there some jihadists wanted to wipe you guys out, you'd be praying for Trump or Biden to, I don't know, press the red button, maybe not go that far, but you'd be praying for your military to protect you from that, right?
I mean, I have no national pride, but yes, I want all people to be, protected from violence, but I don't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that the United States is currently funding and supporting the Israeli government, and as an American, I strongly condemn that. So
Sure.
if I lived in Israel, I would strongly condemn what's happening as well.
I agree with you there. I think you might take an anti-war stance or an anti-Zionist stance in the case of Zionism, meaning certain things. We can go into the specifics of that, because I think the term Zionism just has such a broad meaning nowadays. It means a million different things at the moment. But ultimately, you wouldn't. I mean, September the 11th attacks. So this was motivated by the same things, October the 7th. So this was about it was about Israel. So the reason the 9/11 attacks were planned by Al Qaeda was because of American intervention in the Middle East, mostly to do with their arming and support of Israel. But you would obviously want the 9/11 hijackers to be taken out before that happened, right? And you would generally, if a nuke was heading towards the US to wipe it out, which is probably what Iran would do if they got their hands on a nuclear weapon with regards to Israel, you would generally, even though you might not exist with certain things the US government do, and people are not their governments, right? We all disagree with certain things our government do. I don't like Keir Starmer or any of this shit going on in the UK at the moment. But you'd still just generally, I think if you're Israeli, Catherine, you would still just want Israel to have the right to exist as a country in the same way that as an American, you want America to just have the right to exist without being wiped out.
No, I care about humans. I don't care about like nation states. Like I don't care. I don't think any nation state has a fundamental right to exist. Like I just don't believe that. But I do want to comment on what you said about 9/11. So again, like I'm not a historian, but obviously I condemn, Al Qaeda and what they did on September 11th. But I absolutely do not support the US response, which was instigating the war in Iraq. Like that was not, I do not support that at all. So I think that's interesting that you seem to support to some degree. I'm sure you have disagreements with, certain things, but it sounds like you're not calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and that you do think that what Israel is doing is like defensive.
Well, yeah, I think that if we were to call for a ceasefire, that would just mean one side is doing a ceasefire, and then, I mean, Hamas are terrorists. They don't care about ceasefires. I mean, technically, in fact, I could be wrong in saying that they might have even broken a ceasefire by committing October the 7th. I could be wrong about
Hamas, that. I condemn Hamas. I think it's a violent resistance movement. I don't condemn or condone like attacking civilians, but at the same time, like how can you say, Hamas is a terrorist organization, but the Israeli government isn't when they're like committing a freaking genocide? Like, how can you say?
Well, okay. I guess we can go into the specifics of this, because here's another thing that I'm not understanding and that I don't think people on the pro-Palestine side have explained well enough. What's the difference actually between, say, the bombing of Dresden in World War II and the bombing of Palestine, except that the bombing of Dresden was probably far more indiscriminate and killed more people? Because the German civilian casualties by the end of World War II was about 1.5 million. And Dresden just went up it was bombed for 4 consecutive days, just carpet bombed with incendiary devices by the Allies. People were just being burned alive. And I think if we were to see the horrors of that in HD footage right now, it would be awful to watch all the stuff that was happening to those children who had nothing to do with it in Germany. But I'm struggling to see what the difference is between the Allied intervention in World War II to eliminate fascism from Europe and the Israeli intervention an American intervention in this case, because they're arming Israel and whatever, to eliminate Islamofascism in the Middle East, which, Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies of Iran, right? I don't see what the difference is. I'm not saying either's nice, but I think morals kind of fly out the window when it's war. When it's like, okay, a war is going to begin. During World War II, like when the horrific announcement came on the radio, like in the UK at the time, the Prime Minister said, I'm very horrified to announce that we are now at war with Germany. No one discussed this is right or wrong. No one discussed oh no, this is how is this morally this or that? It was just kind of like, oh shit, there's a war. And then they just announced about the bomb shelter stuff. They just started announcing right there and then on the radio, when you hear this siren, it means go here. When you hear this, it was just like, we're at war. There's going to be places being bombed. What's the difference between Dresden and Palestine?
So I don't know. Again, this is not my area, so I don't know, to be honest, anything about Dresden. But from the way you described it, it sounds like there were some war crimes committed that I would not have supported. So
Right. So and then I guess the question gets started about what is a war crime when it comes to bombing to try and eliminate
like
fascism.
targeting civilians, civilian infrastructure, like I
Yeah, it's I mean, it's horrible. I mean, I don't think anyone has ever liked bombing. But unfortunately, it's just one of the things that kind of happens in war. And I guess this is why I think a lot of this is motivated, even unknowingly, by anti-Semitism. Is that Israel is probably the only country that has been super scrutinized for bombing. That includes over Saudi Arabia right now, which is bombing the shit out of Yemen. But no one's talking about that. And there's other bombings going on in the world that people just aren't mentioning. There's like 15 genocides going on that no one's speaking about. So I do think that there are just some massive inconsistencies here. I think and I just want to talk about the ratio as well. The Israel-Hamas war has actually one of the lowest combatant to civilian ratios that we could imagine. I think it's 1-to-1. Still too high. Still horrible.
okay, that I would dispute that.
All right. What would you say to that?
Hold on. I have notes here. So, where is... So yeah, in two separate studies analyzing the Ministry of Health numbers, that's the death toll in Gaza, it was concluded that over 61% of recorded deaths were women, children, or elderly. However, it would be wrong to consider only women, children, and elderly as non-combatants. Like, you can't just classify all adult men as combatants. So that's like a massive undercount. Like, that's a very conservative estimate. If you're going to say that's 61%, over 61%. And then other like scholars and groups have analyzed these numbers. According to the Euromed Monitor, the civilian death rate is around 90%. So 1-to-1, that's like what the IDF is saying.
No, this is what the Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry is saying. So this could actually be
so are you like denying their figures?
Yeah, I'm saying if anything, Hamas has overinflated the civilian.
Okay. I have a response to this. So, okay, on October 7th, 1,200 Israelis were killed by Hamas. Since October 7th, over 41,000 Palestinians have been killed. That's according to Gaza Ministry of Health. These numbers are backed up by the United Nations, specifically agencies like UNICEF, OCHA, and the WHO. A peer-reviewed article by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in The Lancet, as well as countless NGOs. Even the fucking US Department of State has cited the Gaza Health Ministry's death tolls in its own internal reports. So to suggest that these numbers are over-reported because this Ministry of Health is run by Hamas is no different than Carnists denying the fact that a well-balanced vegan diet is not only nutritionally adequate, but may provide health benefits. Like, you cringe at these Carnists for rejecting the position of the American Academy, or what is it, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, World Health Organization, American Heart Association, Harvard Medical School. Like, they're denying that, like, all these facts. So how can you sit there and reject the position of nearly every major human rights organization, including United Nations, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, Euromed Monitor, the International Federation for Human Rights, Save the Children, Oxfam, like the list goes on. So all of these organizations accept these numbers and are calling for a ceasefire.
Well, I don't know where they're getting these statistics from, because those aren't the statistics I've heard. But in any case, the UN is corrupt, and they've actually a lot of Hamas members are actually part of the UN, are part of that UNRWA. There were UNRWA members taking part in the October 7th attacks, and two of the bodyguards of Matey Boy Sinwar, whatever his name is, killed yesterday, were found to be UNRWA staff as well. But in any
you
case,
sound like a carnist right now, because you're just like, I just listed all of these organizations, and you're like, nope, still don't believe it, not reliable. Like,
well, no, but I would
like
just,
every major human rights organization
but
that
would
I
just,
could think of, I Googled, I looked at their position, and they support a ceasefire.
but I could just say you sound like a carnist because you're going with, oh, this is what the doctor told me to eat, or something like that. These organizations are corrupt.
Okay, hold on a second. What you're doing is you're accusing me of like an appeal to authority, but there's a difference. An appeal to authority is appealing to like a specific person or one specific organization. So saying like, this doctor has these credentials, therefore like what he's saying is legitimate. There's a difference between that and appealing to the consensus among like all of these freaking organizational bodies. Like that's not an appeal to authority. Like, you're looking at like what all of these people are saying, and they are all calling for a ceasefire. Like, I'm not just pointing to one, oh, UNRWA says it, so it must be true.
Yeah, well, the IDF has intelligence they don't have. Their military intelligence. So why would they care if they're calling for a ceasefire? They need Hamas to be eliminated.
Hold on a second. So you are trusting the IDF, and I am trusting, what was it? Let's see. The Amnesty International, United Nations, Doctors Without Borders, Human Rights Watch, Euromed Monitor, International Federation for Human Rights, Save the Children, Oxfam. That's like a non-exhaustive list.
Who are they, and why should we take their figures more seriously than others?
So,
but you know what, Catherine?
The IDF versus all of these people, like all of these organizations.
But I think
that is irrational.
But you're cherry picking because you're cherry picking. Because
how am I cherry picking?
Because I've seen loads of stats saying that it's a one-on-one, one-to-one civilian to casualty ratio. But even if it wasn't, Catherine, listen, right? Proportionality has never been a thing in war. In World War II, about 12 to 16 or something US civilians died. 1.5 million German civilians died. So proportionality in war is bullshit. It's not a part of war. If one country has a better military or more advanced military than the other, the unfortunate case of that is that they're going to be the ones doing airstrikes and drone attacks and stuff and have tanks. That's obviously going to result in a higher civilian casualty ratio on the other side. And that's just a very unfortunate part of war.
I would disagree. I think that, like, if you look at the term war implies that there's at least like some type of level playing field, not equal, but like the numbers, like, again, okay, so since on October 7th, 1,200 Israelis were killed. I think since October 7th, and including that day, it's like 1,700 Israelis have been killed. But these numbers that we looked at, the 41,000 statistic, is a massive undercount because it doesn't factor in all of the people who are missing and presumed buried under the rubble, nor does it include those who have died from disease and malnutrition as a consequence of the attacks and blockade. Like, the actual death count is estimated to be over 114,000 people so far, which approximately 17,000 have been children, including 2,100 infants and toddlers, and tens of thousands more have been orphaned, injured, and or disabled. So, like, you cannot deny this is a disproportionate response to Hamas killing 1,200 Israelis.
But then we're back to the question I asked about 5 minutes ago is what's the difference between that and the bombing of Germany? Because Germany got absolutely flattened in World War II, whereas the US didn't get touched. The US didn't have Pearl Harbor was it on the US. That was it. It didn't get touched after that.
Okay, I'm not a World War II historian, but I wouldn't just say, just because it was a just cause, generally speaking, to fight the Nazis, like, I'm not a pacifist, right? That doesn't mean I condone like certain like war crimes that took place during World War II, like Hiroshima.
Oh, sure.
Are you gonna say that was justified? Like,
Well, again, this is one of the like. Obviously, I hate the fact that Hiroshima or Nagasaki ever happened. But again, wartime is one of those things where just morality just kind of fucking flies out the window. No one knows the answers to any of these questions, because the reason the military do these, horrific acts at the time is to prevent a further number of their own dying. The reason Japan, Germany, and Palestine have been or are being bombed is to prevent whoever it is his own kind being killed, and that's why they bomb them ultimately. Let me ask you a question about the Iron Dome thing. Do you know what the Iron Dome is?
Vaguely.
So it's an extremely intricate missile defense system that Israel has, and it shoots down like hundreds of rockets a week. Basically, Hamas and Hezbollah have been firing rockets every day at Israel. If you look at a rocket map of Israel, it's just like all over it. Israel would be a smoldering wreck if it weren't for the Iron Dome. And then God help us if Iran gets their hands on a nuke.
I support the Iron Dome. Like, that's great. Like, protect civilians from bombs. Awesome.
But the way you phrased some of your questions a moment ago, it's almost baked into it as if like Hamas and Hezbollah wouldn't kill more Israelis if it's like that. Oh, October the 7th, that was it. That's just a little warning to you guys. No, they're firing shit at them every single day.
Okay,
they want Israel knocked off the map.
Why?
They want every Israeli dead.
Why do they want them dead, though?
Over bullshit land disputes, because Iran wants to establish a caliphate in the Middle East.
Oppressed by the Israeli government, and they're kept in like open air prisons, and fucking they're occupied by the IDF. So it's a resistance movement, a violent one. I don't support the violent, killing of Israeli civilians, but like we have to. Okay. So I know we had talked about this in the comment section a bit, like whether Hamas should be eliminated, right? So you're saying that what they're doing is justified because you're preventing more future deaths of Israelis.
Yes.
Right. So I agree that Hamas is bad. I can agree that they should be eliminated, but not at the cost of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilian lives. Like, if the goal is to eliminate Hamas, I don't believe that bombing and starving Hamas members along with their families is going to achieve this.
Oh, well, Hamas aren't starving at all. They're receiving billions from Iran, and they're under the tunnels.
Palestinian civilians are starving to death.
Yeah, because Hamas keeps all the food for themselves in their underground terror tunnel system.
Okay. I am not going to comment on that because
Well, put it this way, Catherine. Why? Okay, so Hamas currently has an underground tunnel system in Palestine that's more complex than the New York subway system. You're talking hundreds of miles of tunnels underground. With the billions they receive from Iran, they haven't either built a single bomb shelter for their civilians, which is a standard part of war, by the way. That's like the first thing you do. Like, as soon as Britain declared war on Germany, that was it. Germany and Britain were just like build bomb shelters, and then Britain put their civilians in the London Underground as well. Apart from that, Hamas haven't put any of their own civilians underground. They haven't built a single bomb shelter. The reason for this is because
they don't have nearly the resources that Israel does. Israel is being supported by the U.S. government. Of course, they can afford an Iron Dome system.
No, but how are Hamas affording all the money to buy these insane amounts of weapons and build an underground tunnel network? And they can't build a single bomb shelter or put a single. Forget the money.
They only have so much money to like. I don't know about this, underground tunnel system, so I can't really speak to that. But going back to my
Hamas are largely hiding. I just wanted to make a final point on that, because my key point on this, Catherine, is Hamas want to maximize civilian casualties to tug on the heartstrings of Westerners.
Okay.
They promised them paradise. Well. They promise Palestinians paradise. They call them martyrs. And they even do this to children. Like, I've seen footage of like a Palestinian holding up a child in front of IDF soldiers and saying, shoot him, send him to paradise. That Hamas teach backward propaganda there to their citizens that they'll go to paradise. They want to maximize their own civilians' casualties And they just hide underground, eating and getting fat, while their civilians just above ground are just kept up there.
I'm not speaking to stuff that I don't like. I don't know what you're talking about. So
that's fine.
I do want to make a point that like going back to the elimination of Hamas. So just as I don't believe that killing homeless people would eliminate homelessness, I don't think killing children, like that's just creating more Hamas members. To eliminate homelessness, we have to address the problem that causes homelessness, which is the lack of public housing. So to eliminate Hamas, we need to address the problem and end the Israeli occupation of Palestine, not just like kill off everyone. That's not how you eliminate Hamas.
Perhaps we could go into this whole Israeli occupation of Palestine thing, because this is something as well that this whole stuff about humans and land and stuff, this concept of land and who owns land, I think it's a very screwed up system that we live in as humanity. And the fact that there are wars over pieces of land, I just think is disgraceful and a testament to how stupid we are as a species. But what's the actual argument that it's Palestinian land?
They were there when the Israelis moved in and tried to settle Israel.
But what was it at the time?
I'm not a historian, so
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was a British overseas territory, and then before that, it was a Turkish one. It was part of the Ottoman Empire, and then before that, it was Roman territory, and then before that, it was the ancient kingdom of Israel and Judah. Now, what I'm saying is, and this is a crazy stat that's probably changed actually a lot of my opinion on this conflict, because I always actually assumed before it was stolen land as well. I always thought that it was this kind of corrupt thing that got done, and Palestine I assumed it was pretty identical to the British partition of India, when India was an actual country, and it got divided into India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh against the wishes of the people. That was a huge crime by the British, in my opinion. Palestine has never, ever been a country. It's never been a state, ever. It's always just been an overseas territory of other countries. So there were Arab settlers living on the land at the time the British granted Jews after the Holocaust the right to the land. And they just offered the Jews and the Arab settlers at the time, these Arabs who were living there, they were coming from like Jordan, Egypt. So the second most common surname in Palestine is El Masri, which means the Egyptian. So Palestine's never had its own language, never its own coin. It's never had its own king, leader, its own like religion. All Palestine as a flag, as a regime, just got created in something like 1960 something. And it was after the Arab, the flag is based on the Arab revolt. Before that, Palestine's flag was the British flag.
Okay,
and then before that, it was the Turkish flag.
Irrelevant. No,
it's relevant because you said stolen land.
No. But like they were living there and they were forced out. Like you could say the same thing about certain Native American tribes. Like they didn't have a flag, and like I don't know, like they just lived there, and then we came in and forced them out. Like.
No, but there was no coming in forcing anyone out, because the point is it was a British territory anyway. So the British said we're giving we're going to allow Jews to live here.
And how long has it been a British territory? It sounds like they were under some sort of British colonial rule, which that's also fucked up. Like
Yeah, I don't actually know about the complexities and stuff of what it was like, but put it this way, I think most of this is where the anti-Semitism comes in. The Arabs living on that area of other countries' territory, they only started massively, from what I know, kind of complaining once Jews moved into there. They were, as far as I'm aware, fairly happy living on British territory under Turkish territory. I'm sure there would have been some backlash, some discontent with it, but the idea that it's stolen land is just factually incorrect, because it was Britain's land at the time, and Britain just said, "Here you are, Jews, you can have this land. You've been persecuted in every country you've been in." They offered and then this is where the fighting started happening. The Jews accepted the agreement to live alongside the Arabs, but the Arabs rejected it. So then a war happened. And now we're in the fucked up situation that we're in.
Wait, can you say that last part again?
Yeah, so essentially, once the Jews moved into there after World War II, after the Holocaust, what happened was a treaty was offered in which the two groups, the Jews and the Arabs, would live alongside each other peacefully on this piece of British land called Palestine. The Jews accepted the deal. They said, "Yep, we'll gladly live alongside the Arabs here." And the Arabs said, "No, we don't want them here." And then a war started.
Well, maybe that's because the Palestinians lived there first, and they weren't just going to accept that. Like, I don't know. Again.
Yeah, but why didn't they just say, yeah, let them live, let them, like, why not? The point is, the Jews at the time would have essentially been refugees coming to a piece of land and living there.
Okay, but what we're talking about is like how many decades ago? Like,
it was a long time ago.
People of Gaza right now, like the 17,000, and again, that's a very conservative estimate because that's based on like identified corpses. The upwards of 60,000 children that have been killed. They had nothing to do with any of this. Like, they were just born on this piece of land, and they're being murdered because they were born on the wrong piece of land. Like,
yeah, and that's the same that happened to it has been happening to Israelis and Jews for centuries as well. So it's happening on both sides. It's one of the
not in this
aspects.
Particular situation. Like, I agree that, you know, historically Jews have obviously been like are oppressed, and the Holocaust happened, and like that's terrible. I don't support that. But you know this better than anyone as a vegan. Like, just because you are a member of an oppressed group doesn't mean you can't also be an oppressor. Like, you know, that Black people are oppressed by systemic racism, but if they're not vegan, they are oppressing animals. So like, the same thing can be said about Israeli Jews. Like, yes, they've experienced oppression and anti-Semitism, but that doesn't give them the right to go and genocide Palestinians.
Well, obviously, the argument from Israelis is that they're not genociding Palestinians. They don't want a genocide of Palestinians. They're just saying that this is the anti-Semitism because you would not accuse Britain and the USA of genociding Germans in World War II. That is the propaganda that the Nazis spun, though, during the bombing of Berlin and Dresden and all these places. The Nazis did put out propaganda saying that they were the victims of this, that the British and the Americans wanted to just erase their culture, that they're targeting predominantly civilians, that they're just indiscriminately killing them. And I think Hamas and Hezbollah do use a lot of old neo-Nazi recycled propaganda. And you see Hezbollah, they do the Nazi salute. So these are just two groups, two systems run by fascism, by Islamofascism and neo-Nazism. And even the Go on.
Go ahead.
And even the Palestinian militant group Black September, they coordinated the 1972 or something like that, terror attacks on the Israeli athletes with German neo-Nazis. So they're like in bed with each other on this thing. And the Nazis even said during the bombing of Dresden and Berlin in World War II, they even said this was part of a Jewish plot to like take over the land or to paint themselves as victims or something when they're the aggressors. So Hamas is just recycling, and Hezbollah are recycling all this crap from the 40s.
But I would disagree that they're the aggressors. I think that Hamas is a violent resistance movement against the aggressor, which is the IDF.
But they're a government in their own territories. So in Gaza, people keep saying that that's an open-air prison or whatever. Israel has pulled out of Gaza. So the prison is run by Hamas, who are killing gay people there, who give women lower rights than men.
And I don't, this is where we disagree. Or I'm sorry, this is where we agree. Like, I agree that Hamas and Islam, like their Islamic ideology is oppressive. Like, they subjugate women, gay people. Like, I agree. I'm not like, I'm not saying that because they're being oppressed by Israel, therefore they're pure and innocent and do absolutely like hold no oppressive views of their own. Like, But I don't want to, genocide Trump supporters here in the United States. Like, I don't think we should start bombing the Bible Belt because they're oppressors, like hold oppressive views.
Can you name one Israeli, or in particular Israeli vegan, who wants to genocide Palestinians?
So, okay, let's talk about the genocide versus, like, I believe it's a genocide. You clearly don't. So, unfortunately, I do think there are some Jewish vegans, Zionist vegans, who are supporting a genocide. And I think that there's a lot of evidence. One being like the fact that 41,000 at minimum have been killed as a response to 1,200 Israelis dying.
Okay. I'll let you finish, but
okay. So to prove, like, a genocide is defined as the deliberate killing of a large group of people from a particular ethnic national group with the aim of destroying that nation or group, like in whole or in part. And you don't have to be an expert on history, the history of the region, to acknowledge that what is taking place is a genocide, because the intent is there. So Israeli officials have expressed intent to destroy Hamas, but they make no distinction between Hamas and Palestinian civilians. So they've described, this is on the record, they've described them as human animals, monsters, barbarians, and savages. Gaza was described as the city of evil. In a deleted tweet, Netanyahu said, "This is a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle." So, like that's very dehumanizing language. So I'm just going to quote this article, if that's okay. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said that Israelis' attack on Gaza is a war that is intended really and truly to save Western civilization from an empire of evil. Netanyahu and other senior Israeli ministers have left no doubt that saving Western civilization requires the total destruction of the it's hard to read sometimes, requires the total destruction of the Palestinians in Gaza by describing them as the biblical people of Amalek, a people perceived in whole as an enemy that must be destroyed, and as Nazis. This crude and dangerous weaponization of religion and the Holocaust points to a genocidal state of mind. Perpetrators of genocide always see the group they are attacking as posing an existential threat to themselves, so that genocide in their minds is a legitimate and necessary defense. This is how the Nazis understood their genocidal assault on Jews during World War II, and this is how Israelis now view their genocide on Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, I don't know the validity of the quote, but I mean, the average Israeli would just say it's the other way around, that all their neighbors want them wiped out, and Jews have been kicked out of every single country in the Middle East. And then Israelis have made their land a haven, a safe haven for Arabs who have equal rights under the law. Women have equal rights. The gay people, including gay Arabs, have equal rights.
That is not true.
It is true.
No, you can't. I don't think gay marriage is legal in Israel.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right about that.
And they don't grant equal rights to immigrate. So if like a Jewish person wanted to move to Israel, I'm pretty sure they just like let them become a citizen. But like if an Arab wanted to just move to Israel, they have to go through this whole process. Like that's not equal rights.
Well, yeah, every country has stronger passports and whatnot in getting into a country, right? I mean, you'd know that as an American citizen yourself. But no,
I'm saying, like, if a non-Israeli Jewish person from America wanted to move to Israel, I'm pretty sure they would just be granted citizenship. Whereas if like a Arab person wanted to move to Israel, they don't just get granted citizenship. So that's not equal rights.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't know the full story about that, but pretty much when they're in Israel, and the gay marriage thing, I'm pretty sure they do have civil partnerships in Israel. But in any case...
No, I'm pretty sure they don't. I'm pretty sure they only recognize like religious marriage, but you can fact check me.
Yeah, maybe an Israeli will have to fill me in on that. I don't know. But In any case, they give their land as a safe haven for gay Arabs who flee persecution in their own countries. They take in Arab refugees from other countries. They take in, in fact, I think over the years there's quite a chance they might have even taken in more Palestinians, for example, than even like Egypt has. Egypt just has a very strong kind of anti-Palestinian immigration rhetoric. If you watched like the channel of I don't know if you know the YouTuber Corey Gill Schuster, he does interviews in the Palestinian territories and in Israel as well, and he'll interview in Israel he'll interview both Jews and Israeli Arabs, and then in the Palestinian territories he'll interview Palestinians. And when in Israel he interviews the Israeli Arabs, so Arabs who actually live in Israel, like Tel Aviv and all these places, and says things like, do you believe you're living under apartheid or that you're discriminated against? The vast majority of them just tend to say, no, I feel like I feel great living here. There are Arab Muslims who serve in the IDF and they get given, their food of choice.
The same thing happened though, like during slavery. Like there were black slaves who were paraded around by white slave masters as like, see, they enjoy being a slave. Like, I don't know if that's perfectly analogous, but like I don't think that pointing to like a handful of Arabs who live in Israel and like,
well, it's not a handful. There's quite a significant Arab population in Israel, and
I don't know enough to comment, but like,
yeah. And there's mosques everywhere there, and there's a lot of problems that people will get, whether they're Christian or Muslim. They might be discriminated against in Israel by like a lot of the ultra Orthodox Jews who comprise of a very small percentage of the Israeli population. But the average Israeli person, who we might call a Jew, but that's just purely on ethnic basis, they tend not to believe in the religious stuff. This is especially true within the vegan movement. I haven't seen any religious Zionist Jews who think God granted them this land or any of this crap. And this actually, I want to actually go back to my post, actually, Catherine, because as we said right at the start of the stream.
Real quick, can you address the like genocidal intent, like all those quotes from Israeli officials calling them, human animals and saying things like, total annihilation and.
Well, they were talking about Hamas. They haven't.
But the point is the way they talk about is like Palestinians is they don't make a distinction between Hamas and Palestinian civilians. They just paint with a broad brush and say that all Palestinian civilians are Hamas. Like, that's why they're killing children, because they're like, oh, that's a future Hamas member, so it's Hamas.
They wouldn't be so precise in their strikes if that was the case, because they do leaflet drops and stuff to say that this area is going to come under this level of bombing or military occupation. You have to get out.
And so go where? And then they bomb the freaking humanitarian tents where, like, Doctors Without Borders is helping people who were injured, and then they horrific. Bomb them. Like, it's not,
and it's Hamas's fault. It's Hamas's fault because they.
How can you say that?
Because Hamas purposely.
Israel's the one dropping the bombs on them.
Because they know
it's Hamas's fault.
Because Israel is bombing a military target there. They put their rocket launchers and they put their chief of commands there, so that area will get struck, so that civilians die and they can maximize casualties rather than just put them underground or build them a bomb shelter.
But Israel is the one dropping the bomb. If you were,
which happens in war, and they're rocketing Israel every day.
Hold on a second. Say there was a shooting happening in an elementary school, because that happens in America, unfortunately. And say, there's a bunch of kids trapped in a room, and the shooter is like using them as human shields. Does that give the police the right to just slaughter the entire classroom because they're targeting the shooter? No.
Okay, so hold on, Catherine. That would happen if they were convinced that there would be more casualties if they didn't do it. I'll give you an example.
You can't prove that.
Catherine, I can. when a
Okay.
plane gets hijacked in the United States, the standard protocol is to, and it's heading to a building since 9/11. The standard protocol by the US military is to scramble fighter jets and shoot the passenger plane down, which would kill all the passengers before
Sure,
it
but
hits
they
a
were going to
target. So
die
they do this.
anyway. They were going to die anyway because they've been hijacked. So like that's
Right.
not
So
the same
the
thing.
human no, but the point I think with the classroom analogy, so the school shooter is going to shoot these kids ultimately. So that they might, I don't know, if there was some crazy scenario where, I don't know, rockets were being fired out of the building by the school shooter and it was just bombing all civilians around them and they just need to neutralize the threat quick. Yeah, they'll drop a bomb on that school and kill every kid in that school. They would.
But what has happened since October 7th? Literally only 1,700 Israelis have died since I said September 11th, October 7th. Like that's a disproportionate response to then kill 114,000 people, like projected to be more because of starvation and all of that.
And number one, proportionality is not a thing in war, as we discussed by the 16 or so US civilians killed in World War II and the 1.5 million Germans.
I don't think I agree with that though, because like.
And number two, Hamas and Hezbollah, if they wanted to kill every Israeli, they would. They're firing rockets at Israel every single day. And if Iran gets hold of a nuke, because Hezbollah and Hamas are proxies of Iran, Iran will not hesitate to drop the nuke on Israel and wipe every single Israeli out. They're at war ultimately with Iran.
But that's and I would disagree if they did that. Like if suddenly Hamas gained more power, more resources, and started like really fighting back, and then say they flipped it, and then, you know, years from now they started fucking genociding Israelis, I would be screaming about that too. Like I'm not.
Okay, well, all right. To just before we go back to my post, then, just to end this little diatribe about our admittedly very limited knowledge, and I'm sure there's two sets of people screaming at me and you right now in the comment section, calling us God knows what. But what's your solution, Catherine? So you don't want to bomb the shit out of Gaza. Okay, that's fine. What's your solution? What should Israel do?
End the occupation. Stop subjugating Palestinians.
What do you mean by end the occupation? What, are you saying they need to go somewhere?
No, they need to. I mean, I don't know like logistics of how to solve this problem. But what
I don't think anyone does. That's the problem.
What they're doing now is creating more Hamas members. Like killing homeless people is not how you end homelessness. You have to stop, give people housing.
Well, what should they give Hamas to give Hamas what
they
want?
should
Israel?
give Palestinians equal rights. And and the pro-Israel side say we've offered them peace treaty after peace treaty, two-state solution after two-state solution. We've pulled out of Gaza and just said, guys, have it, just have your own territory. And it's gone the opposite way of peace. They pulled out of Gaza and suddenly they get more rocket attacks, they get more terror attacks. So they're saying, if anything, they needed a military presence in Gaza. Because if anything, they're saying what you're saying, the opposite. They have defense mechanisms, like they have the Iron Dome, they have if there was an attack, like I'm not a pacifist, so if Israel was being attacked and like their civilians were being killed, like I understand like striking back, but like I disagree with you when you say like, oh, proportionality is not doesn't matter in war. Like I think that there is a such thing as a disproportionate response. And I think that this is a clear example of a disproportionate response.
The disproportionate response, an Israeli would say, would be to nuke Gaza. They haven't.
That wouldn't even serve their interests, because they would they would be nuking themselves basically, because it's the same freaking land. So.
Well, it's not that they've pulled out of Gaza. It's a Palestinian territory run by the Hamas government.
I'm saying if you were to nuke Gaza, like the radiation or whatever is going to extend into Israel. So of course they're not going to do that.
Well, okay. The response then would just be to bomb every single inch of Gaza with non-nukes, but that's not what they're doing. They are trying their best they can to actually strike Hamas targets, and
Why do you
unfortunately,
think they're
civilians get killed.
trying the best they can? Like, given the, I mean, I guess you dispute the civilian death rate, but that's because you just trust the IDF's numbers and not all these other organizations.
Well, even going by Hamas's own numbers, I think Hamas's own numbers just say a 1-to-1 ratio.
No,
But
it was 61 to 68%, because 61 to 68% of they analyzed the numbers from the Ministry of Health, and that was women, children, and elderly people. So like that is assuming that all adult men are therefore combatants, which is delusional.
But it also assumes
that's not a 1-to-1. That's high. That's greater than a 1-to-1.
But it also assumes that women and children are not combatants, when that Hamas does recruit women as suicide bombers, and it does unfortunately recruit children from school age. Hamas do have unfortunately used child
children
soldiers.
Can't I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, no, it's horrible. It's absolutely awful that and this is where antinatalism comes in. I think bringing children into a war zone is just is child abuse. And the fact that
but they don't have these people are impoverished. They don't have like access to birth control. Like you can't put that on them. Like, I'm also an antinatalist. Okay, I would be doing everything in my power if I lived there to not get pregnant. But like, there's like fucking IDF are like raping people. Like, you can't just say that they're immoral for like bringing children into a war zone when like.
Sure, I can.
Like, you can't put the blame on them for that.
Why not?
Because the Israeli government is the one doing they're the aggressor. They're like dropping bombs and doing blockades and not allowing food, fuel, water into the region.
And you
can't blame the people for like getting pregnant.
Yeah, you can. If I lived in a jihadist run war zone, Catherine, if I lived in a jihadist run war zone, do you think I would be as selfish enough to bring a kid into that?
They're not. These are impoverished people. They're not like reading books about fucking antinatalism.
Bigotry of low expectations.
No, it's not. No. Oh my gosh.
Poor people can't be vegan. They can't be antinatalist. So we should just excuse child abuse. Okay. Here's one for you, Catherine. Should Palestinians be accountable if they are sexist or homophobic or rape?
Yes.
So you do believe they have responsibility for their own actions?
Yeah, but like when it comes to pregnancy, it's not always. Antinatalism is the most fringe ass ideology. Like nobody is thinking about this. Like I'm sure
people should be. This should
sure.
Why are people in a war zone choosing to bring their kids in to die for a flag, a regime? It's disgusting. I can't believe people do this.
They also, I agree that like what the belief system they're indoctrinated into is like Islam. Obviously, I don't think antinatalism is promoted in Islam. So
by the way, for anyone who thinks, because I'm sure there'll be people in the comments call me, oh, you're racist or this and that, I agree with it. As a Brit, I agree with this during the Blitz. Like if any Brit during the Blitz was popping out kids, to quote Jeremy Kyle, put something on the end of it. Or if you don't have contraception, just abstinence.
I guess as long as you're consistent and you're an antinatalist across the board and you don't think Israelis should be having kids and you don't think like anyone should be having kids, sure, you're not racist.
Yeah. No, that is my position.
But I do think it's racist to blame Palestinians for like what is being done to them.
But I consider it child abuse to bring a kid into a war zone. I blame a Palestinian if he rapes someone. I blame a Palestinian if they're homophobic. I blame a Palestinian for stealing. I don't know. Like,
sure. Then I agree that nobody should be bringing kids into this world. But
okay, cool. All right, let's go back to the October the 7th post I made. Okay. Now, I think this is the main point I was making in the comments section that I think is the main reason that the backlash to my post was so disgusting and clearly motivated by anti-Semitism and xenophobia is, let's just grant that absolutely that you're right about everything. Absolutely everything you've said is true. Israel is like really shitty. It's committing a genocide. It's just this horrific country. That still doesn't excuse a single piece of backlash for just saying I'm sickened by xenophobia towards Israelis and anti-Semitism. Because if this was about any other country committing a genocide, like let's talk about China, which is currently, is occupying Tibet. There's these free Tibet posts, and they're committing a genocide of the Uyghur Muslims there. If I condemned anti-Chinese xenophobia within the movement, like I'm going to use an example, let's say, because Wayne Shung used this as was talking about the racism he's received recently on a podcast with David Rams. Like, if someone said, I won't join DXE because it's run by that so-and-so Wayne Shung, and I condemned that, and I said, I'm sickened by the amount of hatred and xenophobia I've seen for Chinese vegans in the movement lately. Chinese vegans, thank you for what you do, and we love you. If people then in the comment section started flooding with, this is disgusting, unfollowed, what about the Uyghurs? Oh, hashtag free Tibet. That would be sickeningly racist, right?
That is so disanalogous.
Oh.
So how? So your post was specifically about the October 7th attacks posted on October 7th. October 7th wasn't just, an attack, like a Hamas attack against Israelis. It was also the beginning of the genocide in Gaza. This wasn't this wasn't a general post condemning anti-Semitism. If it was, I would agree. Okay, I condemn anti-Semitism. And like I mentioned before, I do think there has been a rise in legitimate anti-Semitism because of the conflation of Zionism with Judaism. But if Chinese vegans were condoning the actions of the Chinese government and denying the Uyghur genocide, and then other vegans started calling them out for it, this would not be an example of anti-Chinese bigotry.
No, but I was.
If you then made a post about the sickening amount of hatred and xenophobia that Chinese vegans are receiving, like, people would have the same reaction.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes, I just made the situation parallel, because what you did is your post was about specifically October 7th.
And the actual
it was not a
Israeli hatred.
Yeah, but you're not
anti-Semitism that I've seen.
What implicit in your post is that you support Israel and you are a Zionist. And you're not
that wasn't
talking
implicit
about
in the post?
Yes, it absolutely was.
No, it wasn't.
The post on October 7th only about the Israelis and nothing about the Palestinians.
All right, let's do this. Okay. Do you know what the Kunming knife attack was? The 2014 Kunming train station knife attack?
No.
Okay, so basically, a bunch of Uyghur Muslims in China, because they were, they were being oppressed by the Chinese government. A bunch of them went to this train station in Kunming in China, and they massacred. They massacred 31 people and injured 143 more with knives as an act of resistance. Now, let's assume that had just happened in 2014, and there was loads of anti-Chinese hatred going around in the movement. Oh my God, yeah, free Tibet and hashtag free Tibet. Oh, and also, hashtag Uyghur genocide, and I won't join this group because there's Chinese vegans in it and blah, blah, blah. If I had made that post 1 year after and said, it's 1 year anniversary since the Kunming knife attack, and since then I've been sickened by the amount of xenophobia towards Chinese vegans that they've received since that, no one would comment on it saying, this is disgusting and blah, blah, blah.
But that knife attack had to do with, I'm sorry if I missed something you said there.
It was Uyghurs. It was Uyghur Muslims who committed the knife attack.
Right. And then if since that attack, say the day of that attack, Chinese government ramped up their genocide of Uyghur Muslims and started killing multitudes more people and like then a year later, you're only talking about the victims of the knife attack, and you're not talking about the victims of the preceding genocide from the knife attack.
No
like
one has ever
you would
needed
get
to
the
talk
same
about.
reaction. You would
No.
get the same reaction.
I've seen intersectionals condemn anti-Chinese racism in the movement without ever saying a word about the Uyghur Muslims, without ever saying pre-Tibet.
What are they condemning, like specifically? Like if you're talking about anti-Chinese racism against Wayne Sheng, that has nothing to do with the Uyghur Muslim genocide. Like,
no, right?
So, like, yes,
and, okay,
of course.
and the anti-Israeli hatred and the xenophobia towards them and the anti-Semitism that I've seen in the movement has nothing to do with what those Israelis have done, or it's been highly inconsistent. Let me give you an example. I've seen vegans recently sharing the neo-Nazi documentary Europa, The Last Battle. I've seen the vegan camp out did a post advertising the camp out last year. There was the flat saying all these countries are coming to the camp out. There was like Israeli flag, there was like a Chinese flag, there was a Saudi Arabia flag. The intersectionals in the comments, they only picked on one flag, Catherine. They only said,
no, I agree that's wrong, because like you can't.
And this is
what I was
blame
pointing
all
Israeli vegans, because a lot of Israeli vegans, a lot of Jewish vegans are against, the actions of the Israeli government. So like I don't think you should be keeping them from an event. If like you can't paint with a broad brush and say that all Israeli and all Jewish Israeli vegans like support, Israeli government. Mm-hmm. So
all right,
I agree that is anti-Semitic.
And let's say most Arab vegans did support persecution of gays, and I did a post about condemning anti-Arab racism in the movement. Mm-hmm. Do you think intersectionals would flood the comment section and go, "What about gay people? And this is disgusting"?
Wait, can you say that again?
If most Arab vegans were homophobic and supported mm-hmm. the persecution of gays that goes on in Arab countries, mm-hmm. and I did a post condemning anti-Arab racism in the movement, do you think intersectionals would flood the comments section saying my post is disgusting and what about gay people?
If, to make this actually analogous, if you're calling out anti-Arab racism by saying that pointing out their homophobia is racist, and that's what you're calling, then
where was that baked into my post though, Catherine?
It's absolutely implicit in your post.
No, you only assume that because it's Israelis and they're just associated with that.
No,
they're the only group of people associated with their own government. No other group is. You
made a post on October 7th about October 7th attacks against Israelis.
And the disgusting hatred they've received since
and yet you mentioned nothing about the 41,000 minimum Palestinians that have died since then.
And a lot of intersectionals have never mentioned a thing
that's
about...
That's part of October 7th. Not to what your post did was your post is saying that October 7th is just about the Israeli victims, when October 7th is not only about the Israeli victims, it's also the beginning of the genocide in Gaza.
Okay, so why doesn't the reverse apply? How come on October 7th this year, I saw intersectionals talk about the genocide in Gaza, but they didn't say anything about October 7th and the attacks on Israelis? So they condemn me for not mentioning the Gazans, but then they themselves didn't even. They made
just a tu quo q fallacy. Like they do it too.
And this,
I agree. Hamas is bad. What happened on October 7th is bad. Like you can condemn that, but
but the people commenting, they're clearly anti-Semitic and xenophobic because they are not practicing what they preach. They called my post disgusting. They clearly have an anti-Israeli bias. They do not like Israelis.
They have an anti-Zionist bias. And some do. No. So I'm talking about specifically vegans. So I would say that there is no doubt anti-Semitism happening from vegans because of this situation. Like if you're going to protest Israeli vegans participating in a vegan campout, that's anti-Semitic. Yeah. If you're going to assume all Israelis and all Jewish people are Zionists. That's anti-Semitic. But if you are going to criticize Zionist Jews for spewing Zionism on social media, that is not anti-Semitic. Like that.
But where was the hashtag consistent anti-oppression in my comment section? Because there were people commenting far right shit about Jews. There were people. That's why I posted that story saying intersectionals and Nazis in the comment section of my latest post, and then a handshake. Because Catherine, did you see the comments from the non-intersectional vegans? Did you see the comment that was like, cucking to them won't stop them from replacing you? Are you a Jew worshipper? There was what? Sure.
Yeah,
back in the day,
I'm not gonna. I don't condone.
Okay,
like that.
But the point is, if the backlash wasn't anti-Semitic, they would be attacking those comments. There would be comments like, look, I think George should have mentioned what's happening to Palestinians. However, your comment is deeply anti-Semitic. But there was none of that. None. It was just completely directed at me not mentioning Gazans. They let every comment from far-right vegans slide about Jews replacing me.
I was not like, I looked at your comment section a bit. I engaged a bit, but I don't.
Yeah, sure.
Like,
I only saw you replying to one comment, so I know you didn't see the whole little thing. But there were definitely intersectionals who saw every last word of that comment section.
Okay, but
they conveniently let the Nazi comments slide.
What about the vast majority of comments that I saw? What about the rational ones who are talking about the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism?
Well, again, that I don't think they were rational, because they wouldn't comment on a post about anti-Chinese
okay,
racism.
we already addressed that. We're going in circles.
And I don't agree with your thing.
Okay,
because they wouldn't, even if you matched them up perfectly, even if you matched every single trait perfectly, they would not say a thing if I condemned anti-Pakistani xenophobia, anti-Chinese xenophobia, anti-Arab xenophobia. They don't touch those comments negatively with a barge pole.
How come I don't see those posts from you? I just see the ones talking about anti-white racism and anti-Israeli.
It's simple, because there is no problem with anti-brown or anti-black racism in the movement. Anyone who commented, ugh, this organization's run by an Arab, I'm not going to join that, would be cancelled. But
Wayne Chung has experienced anti-Chinese racism from vegans within the vegan movement.
And whoever that vegan was will be cancelled.
I mean, not necessarily, sure, but...
And this goes to show what I say. So, yeah, there are racist vegans in the movement who have a problem with black people or Chinese people, whatever. And if they say spout their xenophobic or racist shit, they will get cancelled. But you can say anything you want about Israelis and nothing happens. I saw, Catherine, recently someone say we shouldn't share the vegan flag because it was designed by an Israeli.
That's fucking stupid. I agree.
And that's what I'm pointing out, Catherine. People are not their governments. Israeli vegans are the only people in the movement who, whenever you say a thing in support of any hatred they receive, you're the bad guy, because Israelis are their government, but Chinese people aren't, Pakistanis aren't. Why?
You're saying that Israeli vegans are receiving, hatred much more so than like Palestinian vegans, but like there are like Palestinians are being murdered and like starved. Like, is that not a manifestation of hatred?
No vegans are murdering or starving them. No vegans are espousing hatred towards them.
The IDF is like praises themselves for being like a vegan army or some shit. Like, not entirely, but like they literally vegan wash the genocide that's happening by like claiming they're so like woke as a military and they're with their plant-based meals and whatever.
That's happening on both sides. I've seen a lot of greenwashing of Gazans, by the way. I've seen a lot of the intersectional saying stuff like, "Oh, bless the Palestinians, they're taking all these animals in from the streets who are being murdered by the IDF bombs." And it's like, you mean the animal that was bred into slavery by Gazans and is going to have their throat slit on Eid al-Adha as the streets run red with blood? Like, they're greenwashing Gazans to no end, and they're just using animals to dunk on Israel. Have you seen that?
No.
You haven't seen any intersectionals on social media say stuff like, bless the Gazans taking in all these animals and protecting them. The IDF are mercilessly bombing all these animals to death. And they don't say anything about the fact that the Gazans are breeding these animals into slavery. And they say stuff like, if you're truly vegan, why aren't you speaking up about the IDF killing all these animals in bombings? And then you test their consistency and say, okay, yeah, cool. I condemn any Israeli who's not vegan. Will you condemn the Gazans for breeding those animals into slavery in the first place? And then they're like, oh, you're racist. So they don't give a shit about the animals. They're just using animals to dunk on the IDF and Israel.
I would say anyone who's breeding animals into existence to exploit them is in the wrong.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I know you're consistent on that at least. Who are you voting for this year in the presidential election, Catherine? Because I know I know you don't like Biden, but you voted Biden openly, and now he's pro-Israel and stuff. Are you a Stein stan this year?
No, I'm voting for Kamala, but I do not support her stance on this.
Is it not a significant enough issue for you to not vote Kamala and vote Stein instead?
Well, it's not that it's not a significant enough issue. It's just like the reality of living in a two-party system.
So you think Stein won't get in, so you'll
exactly. Like it's lesser of two evils.
So both Trump and Kamala are going to support Israel, so you'll just vote for the lesser of the two evils again. Do you think that Trump would be more likely to ease the war in Gaza?
Oh, Trump is a raging Zionist.
Is Kamala not?
It would be way worse under Trump, I think. Maybe not way worse because Kamala's just going to do nothing, probably. But I think that Trump would shut down protesters. It would be really bad.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess you know more about the US political climate than me. Let's get into go on.
Yeah. Let's do that. But I have one last thing I wanted to mention here. So I wanted to talk about the media bias and use of euphemisms. So there was this study done recently. There have been several studies done about this, but they look at various media sources and they look at like the number of times certain words were used to describe Israelis versus Palestinians. So media bias is evident by the use of euphemisms in reporting on the genocide in Gaza. When talking about Israeli victims, they use emotive language like innocent civilians were brutally slaughtered in a horrific terrorist attack. But then when talking about Palestinian victims, they use more passive language like Hamas militants killed in a blast. Like they're conflating all Palestinians with Hamas. And then they're also saying they were killed by a blast. Like you mean a bomb, like you mean the Israeli government bombed them. And I think that this is like a clear example. It's like the same playbook used by the animal agriculture industry when they use phrases like beef processing facility instead of mass murder factory. So yeah, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it depends which paper you read. There's definitely bias in that all papers are ultimately there to push a political agenda. So if one's pro-Israel, they will use language like that. But then you read, do you know the paper The Guardian?
Sure, yeah. So
The Guardian, for example, or one of the kind of more pro-Palestine papers, they will use kind of softer language for, like, for example, there was a woman arrested by the Israeli forces years back for stabbing someone, for stabbing an Israeli in a terror attack. And they posted this picture, hostage finally released in swap deal, and this, crying woman, and they kind of like made it as if like she was this innocent victim held hostage by Israel when she's actually a knife-wielding maniac. There's papers that won't that almost kind of glorify, in a sense, this Sinwar dude, and they don't mention at all the fact that Israel gave him life-saving brain tumor surgery when they had him as a prisoner. But either side of the thing will use biased language in their reporting. That's just the nature of media.
But it's like the euphemistic language, like even calling it a war is euphemistic because it implies Palestinians have like the power to fight back. We've kind of talked about this already. You seem to disagree, but And then regarding like calling it a genocide, I see a major parallel with like denying or refusing to use this language is no different than Carnus refusing to call what's happening to animals a Holocaust, which I know is like one of your key talking points, which I agree with.
Yeah.
It is a Holocaust. We should call it a Holocaust. That's why I think that it's important to call it what it is, which is a genocide.
Yeah, and then the pro-Israel side would obviously just say that the reverse thing. They're just saying Jews are being genocided and driven out of the Middle East, and Iran wants them wiped out, and that you're refusing to acknowledge it.
Who's doing the killing? Who's doing the killing?
Both sides.
But
and ultimately, and the Israel side are claiming it will more so be Iran if they manage to establish dominance in the Middle East, because they will nuke the shit out of Israel and just obliterate all, 7 million Israelis.
I don't think... Yeah, and if that happened, like if the power, was swapped, I would be condemning Palestinians.
Yeah, but this is Israel's just saying, like, we have this tiny sliver of land. We're hated by all our neighbors. They've driven us already.
We should genocide them. We should genocide the children. How about 2,100 toddlers? Are they Hamas? Are they terrorists?
Well, again, this just goes back to the World War II analogy, and I don't think you managed to provide a distinct difference between the bombing of Palestine and the bombing of Dresden. Apart from Dresden,
I think I was clear in, the fact that I don't know much about Dresden, but also from the way you described it, I was pretty clear that I don't support that. So I think that was a war crime.
But you didn't call, but you didn't call it a genocide.
Sure. I mean, I don't know this. I don't know.
Okay. Well, 1.5 million German civilians died in World War II, and only 16 or so US civilians. And the point is, an Israeli would point out the fact that people on the pro-Palestine side are not calling the mass bombing, the absolute obliteration of Germany, a genocide, but they are calling the much more precise targeting of Hamas military in Palestine a genocide. So they're saying that's
I think, like looking back at history, like I'm sure historians have reviewed, that situation. If they're not calling it a genocide, like I don't know enough about it. Like I don't know. I've heard the word Dresden before, but I don't know shit. Like I'm not a historian.
Yeah, no, look it up. It was obviously horrendous. Like, so the US Air Force and the UK Air Force absolutely incinerated this city called Dresden in Germany.
Well, if it meets the qualifications, like if it meets the definition of genocide, then sure, I'd call it a genocide.
All right, cool, fair enough. Did you want to move on to, you wanted to make some points about intersectionality?
Yes, I did. You saw my comment, I think. I want to know if, I think you have a inconsistency in your messaging on this, because for so long you've been saying, like, keep politics out of veganism, focus on the animals. Like, do you not recognize the inconsistency here?
No, all I'm doing is pushing against the current thing, which I did during the BLM current thing as well. There is a hyper focus on this one thing happening while they're ignoring all these like 15 or so genocides taking place worldwide, like the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar, where Rohingyas are literally being thrown alive into fires by the 969 Buddhist nationalist movement. The intersections.
What leftists are like okay with that?
No, but they aren't mentioning it, which is
okay. Maybe that's like a problem with the media. Like, I wouldn't blame intersectional vegans for like not knowing everything that's going on in the world.
But the problem with intersectionals is they always promote the current thing being pushed by the media, and they don't talk about the other issues. They always turn the movement into the current thing. So I push back.
No, your post was like calling out anti-Semitism, but implicit in that was, conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. But like
I've said that.
you felt the need to like stand up for who you perceive as oppressed. You felt the need to bring politics into your vegan platform because this was, oppression that you don't stand for. So like that's the same reason why intersectional vegans like myself are talking about politics, trans rights, pro-Palestine. Like it's the same exact reasoning.
You're confusing commentary on political issues with commentary on intra-vegan socio-political issues. I make commentary on things affecting the vegan movement. I haven't actually posted anything, just a normal post on my platform. In fact, I'll tell you something that might upset a few Israelis in the comments. I didn't say a fucking thing about October the 7th when it actually happened. I don't really post about world politics affairs or anything like that.
Well, a lot of these intersectional vegans are also like, I mean, I personally like to talk about other topics because I feel like it. But like other vegans, you know, Earthling Ed or whatever, they choose to like, you know, keep politics out of it, focus on the animals. I respect that so long as they're not, you know, posting like oppressive things, like so long as they're not, you know, saying transphobic things or whatever. I'm okay with, you know, their strategy. But anyways, I think that you brought politics into it when your whole shtick is like keep politics out of it.
No, I always talk about socio-political issues affecting the vegan movement.
I know, but like that's what I do largely. Like when I talk about trans rights, I talked about I responded to, you know, David Rams. I responded to Gary Francione. Like typically when I talk about these other things, I like relate it.
Oh, your mic's cut out, Catherine. Oh, there we go. It's back.
There we go.
Yeah.
Typically when I talk about these other issues, I'm like relating it somehow to, you know, I'm talking about it within the context of the vegan movement. So you seem to have a problem with that though.
I don't think the way that I've seen intersectionals talk about it, they're generally talking about turning the movement into a current thing. So, for example, during the BLM hysteria in 2020, they were bullying sanctuaries and organizations to donate to this scam corporation BLM. So they were taking money out of the movement and into it. And they were telling animal rights organizations, why are you posting about this animal rights today of all days? Why aren't you speaking about the murder of George Floyd and all this bullshit? So, but I'm not asking anyone in the movement to turn the animal rights movement into some political thing. I'm just running commentary on something happening in the vegan movement, which is anti-Semitism from other vegans towards Jews and pointing out their fucking hypocrisy.
Well, I think we talked about this when we talked about, you and I had a discussion on Debug Your Brain's channel about intersectionality. Like we do see eye to eye when it comes to, you know, certain intersectional vegans messaging, like I don't agree with. Like I don't think anyone should be demanding that people talk about this thing. Like I think that's unreasonable. I think that like my approach to intersectionality, you seem to have the same exact approach, but we just happen to disagree on this topic. So
that's why that's one of the reasons I got you on, Catherine, because I said we do actually, you're different from 99% of intersectionals that I know. Most intersectionals want to turn veganism into a human rights movement. They want to make it about the current thing. I don't think
that's true. I think most intersectional vegans are like me. I think you just don't see it because you're seeing like you're cherry picking like the, you know, extremist radical weirdos out there who are like,
well, they say the squeakiest
yelling
tire.
Yeah.
The squeakiest tire gets the grease, as the saying goes. So yeah, maybe I haven't been exposed enough to just like the normie intersectional opinions, and maybe it could be the case that more intersectionals are just kind of quiet about it or something. But yeah, unfortunately, what I've received over the years is just the screaming cancellers who want to like come to my door with pitchforks, basically, because I don't have the same opinion on them as they do about whatever irrelevant human political issue.
Well, it's just funny that like if an intersectional vegan who perhaps takes my approach and posts about, you know, something related to the vegan movement, because some vegan influencer said something transphobic, so therefore, you know, you had a problem. It seems you had a problem with that even.
What specifically did I have a problem with? So
like you seem to have a problem with intersectional vegans talking about political issues that you disagree with on their vegan platforms. Even if it's like,
it's only when they force it onto the rest of the vegan movement, so we have to have their view on it, which
well,
is
no,
just going to
I
alienate
do,
people.
no, I do though think that like I can't force anyone to do anything. I would never like, exclude someone for not agreeing with me on something from like a vegan event, but I will enforce that at this said vegan event, you can't be saying, transphobic shit or whatever. Like, we're keeping that out of it. Like, you can't be saying that shit.
Yeah, sure. So we have the same opinion on that. I hold the anti-discrimination policy at events as well.
Yeah, but like, I think that you have a problem with vegans talking about like Palestine, and you think that, can you actually, I don't know if we drilled down on this, can you actually like confirm that my assumption is true, that you do see anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism?
For the most part, yes. In some cases, no. So being against religious Zionism is not anti-Semitism. I'm very much against religious Zionism. This idea that we are God's chosen people and this is our land and no one else can live here. And by the way, we can also expand Israel and this. Yeah, that's totally unacceptable. And being against that is just being a good person. That's not anti-Semitism. And most Jews are against that. But when intersectionals hyper-focus on this anti-Zionism, just meaning that Jews want to live peacefully as everyone does, in the country that they grew up in, and they don't want the country they grew up in to be nuked by Iran, or for them to go back home, wherever that is. I've seen this. I saw an intersectional recently telling the Jews in Israel to go back to Poland. He was on the street with a megaphone saying, "Go back to Poland, for God's sake."
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the anti-Zionism I'm seeing in the animal rights movement is just straight up anti-Semitism. They're just not saying shit about any of the apartheid states surrounding Israel. They're just hyper-focusing on the world's only Jewish state, on the tiniest little Jewish sliver of land in the Middle East. They're just focusing on that.
Seems like whataboutism, because like if you were to ask them, like, "Hey, do you support, this apartheid state?" They're going to say no. Like,
they're supporting Hamas. They're calling them. They're like, I've seen tributes today to this motherfucker who died yesterday, calling him a martyr and a hero. This guy orchestrated the butchering and raping of 1,000 and something people.
Well, how would you feel? How would you feel about the death of Netanyahu? Would that be a good thing?
I see it the same as the death of Liam Payne from One Direction yesterday. It's just like, I don't know.
I don't know what you're talking about, but
you didn't know Liam died?
Mm-mm.
You didn't hear this?
No, I've been I'm doing, this is kind of a side tangent, but do you know the like 75 hard challenge?
Oh, I've heard of it, yeah.
So I think it's insanity, but I decided to do 75 Zen challenge. So I'm staying off social media for the most part, off my phone. So that's why I'm out of touch with the happenings of One Direction.
Just to break the news to you, Liam from One Direction died the other day at age 31.
That's sad.
Yeah, he fell off the balcony he fell off a balcony in Argentina. He was intoxicated and aggressive. I think it might have been a suicide. But yeah,
sad.
Well, what a monumental moment. George breaks the news to Catherine live on air that Liam from 1D has died. That's
sad.
This clip will be replayed throughout. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's how I'd feel about Netanyahu's death. He's just another famous person who died. I don't know.
I mean, in my opinion, he's like an evil person.
Yeah.
And I would not be sad if he died.
And is Yahya Sinwar an evil person?
I don't know who that is.
He's the Hamas leader who got killed yesterday in the drone strike.
Yes, but I wouldn't equate those two. I would say that, so for the same reason I think that like anti-white racism exists, you and I, you seem, it seems like you think that I'm the only person on the left that believes this, but I can assure you it's not just me. But
well, a lot of people on the center left acknowledge that anti-white racism exists, but
no,
on the
even
far
the far left, people like Clementine Morgan. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram, but she's very
I know of her.
anti cancel culture, super hard left, really cool. But anyways, where was I going with this? What were we talking about?
We're talking about the comparison of Netanyahu's death to Yahya Sinwar's death.
So it's the same reason that I condone anti-white racism. Say like Hawaii, right? Hawaii was colonized, stolen by the U.S. government. I think that a lot of Native Hawaiians are racist towards white people. And I think that's wrong, but I do not see it as anywhere near equivalent to being like a white person being racist towards like Black or Indigenous people. I think that's worse. Because their racism is a response to their like colonialism or their colonization and oppression, whereas like a white person's racism towards Indigenous people or Black people or people of color, whatever, is not
but
at all.
Israel saved Yahya
understandable.
Sinwar's. But Israel saved Yahya Sinwar's life. They gave him life-saving brain surgery a few years ago, and then he just goes out and commits the October 7th attacks.
Actually, you know what? Israel, I wrote this down. So fun fact, Israel actually funded Hamas. So just looking at the, like on Wikipedia, I highlighted this quote here. So former Israeli officials have openly acknowledged Israel's role in providing funding and assistance to Hamas as a means of undermining secular Palestinian factions, such as Palestine Liberation Organization. I'm not going to say his name because it's too long and I don't know how to pronounce it, but a general who served as Israeli military governor in Gaza during the 1980s, admitted to providing financial assistance to the precursor of Hamas on the instruction of the Israeli authorities. So basically, they propped them up because they wanted to use them as a justification for genocide, because they are an extremist group. So there's that.
Yeah, I don't know about the validity of that at all, but I imagine that the average response from an Israeli would just be that that's an anti-Semitic piece of propaganda that is used to say that Jews like start wars against themselves. That's recycled from the stab in the back theory from World War I, which means Jews orchestrate these attacks, including against themselves, in order to.
I'm not saying Jews though. Nowhere did I say Jews. I just said Israeli government. So like. But the Israeli officials propped up Hamas. Not Jews didn't prop up Hamas. Like that's so. How is that anti-Semitic?
Well, I'm just saying that's what I think the average Israeli would respond to that. Remember that a lot of stuff about Israel is based on anti-Semitism, and it's just recycled stuff that Hamas and Hezbollah and all of Iran's puppets just kind of parrot from recycled Nazi propaganda. That's what Hamas and Hezbollah do. They do recycle a lot of old Nazi stuff. So we are seeing the similarities of that with a lot of what Hamas is saying and stuff. So, but I don't know. I don't even know the validity of what you're saying. Maybe it's not a conspiracy theory, or maybe it's true. I have no idea.
Yeah, I can actually link all of my sources because I did cite some stats here and have some quotes. I can send you the links if you want to include them in the description box.
Sure, yeah, or you can share this video to your community tab or whatever and just post them in there or whatever. Do you want to get to the super chats?
Sure. And I gotta go in like 10 minutes because I have to pee really bad and I'm starving. So
yeah, same. Yeah. It was only max 2 hours. Okay. So let's do the super chats now. All right. Lead Cohen asks, if Arabia was attacked by the US, would Catherine have the same level of scrutiny towards Arabian vegans as you have with Israel? Please do not hate.
If Arabia was attacked by the US. What? Hold on.
Yeah, I'm going to try and make sense of that as well. So let's say the US bombed Saudi Arabia or something, or part of the Arab world. Would Catherine have the same level of scrutiny towards Arab vegans?
No, because I don't scrutinize Israeli vegans or Jewish vegans. Like if I meet someone who's Israeli, I'm not going to assume that they support Netanyahu. Like if they were spouting, Zionist bullshit on social media, then sure, I would scrutinize them. But like if they just happen to be Israeli, I'm not going to.
So I guess what the comments are saying is that a lot of intersectionals, and this might not just be you, is scrutinizing Israel and Israelis more than they scrutinize America for their foreign wars. For example, when...
Oh, I'm definitely more critical of the US military than Israel.
And I haven't seen one intersectional say that 9/11 was an act of resistance or something, but maybe they will, because it's getting fucking crazy now.
I mean, you could say that, but I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying. Condoning. I mix those words up sometimes. I hope you know what I mean.
Okay, I know what you mean.
Okay.
All right. Soytheist, hey Aditya, how you doing, man? Israel's combatant to civilian ratio is worse than the Bangladesh genocide 1971 carried out by Pakistan per British Medical Journal numbers. Thank you for that, Soytheist. Yeah, I didn't know.
$100? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what that actually is.
These are rupees.
Gotcha.
Rupees. Lead Cohen asks, I wonder who Catherine will be voting for in November. Did you want to just say again?
Yeah,
maybe you missed it.
Yeah, we talked about that. I'm voting for Kamala, but that does not mean I support Kamala's stance on Israel.
Awesome. And last super chat that we've got in is from Soytheist again. He says Bangladesh genocide numbers are worse than Israel's current war numbers using Israeli government numbers and comparing to British Medical Journal numbers on Bangladesh genocide, but not per Bangladesh government figures. All right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Soytheist. And thank you for joining the stream. Did you want to make any kind of closing statement, Catherine, or shall we leave it there? What do you think?
I think I've pretty much said everything. I just think that it's a disproportionate response. I condemn Hamas, and I condemn anti-Semitism. I condemn the conflation of all Jews with Zionists.
A beautiful way to end the stream. Thank you very much, Catherine, for coming on. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had a lot of people watching this. So
how many people tuned in?
Well, we've got 70 watching right now, which is a very high number for my usual shitty live streams. so that's very good. Yeah, usually when I do a live stream, on average, I'll probably get like 20 people watching at once. So this was a very watched one. So hopefully this will have a good figure. So yeah, I want to thank you so much for coming on, Catherine, and providing me with some folly is the word. I don't know what the word is. Providing me with some counter arguments to my position in a reasoned and respectful way. So thank you, Catherine, and I'll let you go eat your food now. And I'm going to go off to a demo now as it happens. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Bye.
All right. Peace, everyone. Bye-bye.